Okay. Eva? Can you guys grab on the way in? Could you grab one of each of those handouts there, please? Girls, grab one of each on the way in, please.
That's what I'm saying.
Hi, listen. That was quick. You got it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll
I
take it for
tried to
class.
email you, but what else?
Okay, that's fine. Just give it to you before you leave tonight. All right, so one of each here, Alyssa. One of each. I've asked each of you to grab, Blake, one of each. I've asked each of you to grab the Supreme Court case studies. And what I'm going to ask each of you to do not complete those until you've watched the 2 or 3 minute video clips on each that I'm going to share with you tonight. Those are due Friday. Both of those sheets and questions are due Friday, but there's a couple of video clips I want you to watch on each of them, which will help you understand them. These are 2 really significant Supreme Court cases. And when you see, by the way, in the future, at many points between now and the end of class, the end of the school year, I will use this abbreviation constantly in class. And when you see it, you'll know what it means. If you don't know already, SCOTUS. Anybody? Any takers on that? So when you hear me say SCOTUS, or you see SCOTUS written down, I'm referring to the Supreme Court of the United States. Okay? SCOTUS, we're talking about a Supreme Court decision. So if I talk about POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, the President of the United States. If I'm talking about FLOTUS, F-L-O-T-U-S, FLOTUS, F-L-O-T-U-S, the First Lady of the United States, or the spouse of the President. So, but SCOTUS will be the most commonly referred to acronym. It stands for Supreme Court of the United States. So when you see SCOTUS case study due, you'll know that I just was too lazy to write Supreme Court of the United States out. So SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. Capiche? All right. We had 15 minutes productive time yesterday. We got our author video in, and we're talking about nationalism and sectionalism. Again, 2 short video clips tonight. The only thing you'll really need to do tonight are 2 short video clips. I'll link those on an Edpuzzle. By the way, every video that I assign, if it's not embedded in one of my PowerPoints or my Google Slides, every video that I assign, there's going to be some type of grade attached to it. Whether that's just viewing it start to finish, whether it's viewing it and answering a pop-up question that might appear. So if I assign a video link, please assume that you're going to be graded on it. And they're usually not terribly long. They're usually short, to the point, and very succinct. I'm not talking about my class lectures. Like if you are out, let's say today, and you missed class and you watch the YouTube video that I record for class, I'm not gonna grade you on completing those. But if I assign an external link or an external video on a topic we've talked about in class, please make sure those videos are designed to supplement and augment your learning on a particular topic. These two Supreme Court cases that I've asked you to take the readings on, those will figure prominently in the Regents and on material going forward. So just be familiar with them, as well as the first Supreme Court case, Marbury versus Madison, which established, Katie, what principle? 2 words.
Judicial review.
Judicial review. The right of the Supreme Court to decide whether a law is constitutional or not. Very good. All right. I want to pick up where we left off yesterday and talk a little bit about nationalism and sectionalism some more. I'm just going to move this around a little bit so I don't get that in the way. I've got some topics that are pretty important today that I want to spend some time on. I'm hoping to get through this PowerPoint today too, so we can start a new topic tomorrow. But new era of nationalism. So we talked last week about the War of 1812 ending, and everybody's happy and feeling jolly that the United States is at peace, and the United States is able to trade again after the war ends, and a new sense of national pride emerged. Of course, this is not going to be monolithic. Not everyone is going to be feeling positive and upbeat and happy. You've got hundreds of thousands of slaves in the American South that are not going to be rejoicing over the outcome of the War of 1812. You've got women who, American women who do not have a lot of political equality, do not have a lot of say in economic matters, but generally speaking, there's going to be a new sense of national pride is going to emerge after the war. This nationalism is going to influence economic and court decisions. This nationalism is going to affect both the economy and it's going to affect Supreme Court decisions, which we'll talk about too today. And how do you think increased patriotism might affect a country's policies? I want to come back to that if time permits at the end of the class period today, but I want you to be thinking about the following as we move forward in class today. I want you to be thinking about this. Patriotism. How do you think patriotism might affect a country's policies? I want you to be thinking about if a country is feeling good about itself and a country is feeling confident in itself, and if people are kind of clicking and businesses are clicking on all cylinders and people tend to be happy and they're making money, how is that going to affect our country's policies, our country's political and social policies? Be thinking about that as we come back, and we'll circle back to that question at the end of the class today. I want to spend a quick moment, though, looking at our author's video on this topic. I think there's we got a video on the new spirit of nationalism. Let's take a peek at Professor Shih and what he has to say on this. A new spirit of nationalism.
In the aftermath of Andrew Jackson's spectacular victory over the British Army at the Battle of New Orleans and the end of the War of 1812, a surge of nationalism swept across the United States, including President James Madison and many Republicans. As a result of this nationalistic spirit, they reversed themselves on a number of key political issues. For example, both Presidents Jefferson and Madison and the Republicans in Congress had steadfastly reduced the strength of the Army and Navy. Now, as a result of the war, President Madison supported increasing military expenditures so that they would be better prepared for the next war, whenever it might occur. At the same time, President Madison now supported a national bank in addition to local and state banks. He also supported the tariff. A tariff is simply a tax on imported goods, and in 1816, the tariff was designed to protect the young American manufacturing sector from European competition, especially the British. In addition, Madison and many Republicans now supported the idea of the federal government helping to fund or finance internal improvements in terms of better roads, canals, and harbors, all designed to support a national economy. So the theme of nationalism versus states' rights continued to be one of the most important aspects of the developing American nation.
So yesterday we talked about that three-legged stool of Henry Clay, and we talked about his plan, the American system, which called for a rechartering of the national bank. It called for a strong central bank. It called for internal improvements in the form of infrastructure, roads, bridges, canals. And what was the third component of his American system? We talked about internal improvements. We talked to national bank, and his third, the tariff of 1816, placing a tax on imported goods to protect American businesses. And we said at the end of class, while in theory tariffs are designed to protect American businesses, to encourage people to buy American-made goods, the reality is that in many cases tariffs can actually cause domestic good prices to be hiked, because knowing that Americans are going to be buying American-made goods, it can sometimes lead to manufacturers jacking the prices of their goods even higher than what they would normally price them. So tariffs in theory should work, but oftentimes they result in prices of goods increasing. So just be aware of that moving forward. All right, so the economic nationalism and the tariff of 1860. When I was a younger adult, and even as a child, there used to be commercials on television, and it didn't specifically apply to cotton products, but there used to be commercials that encouraged Americans to buy American-made goods. To buy American-made goods, whether it's cars, whether it's electronics. I have never owned a foreign car until I bought a Kia in 2018. Every car I purchased had been an American-made car. Now I bought a Kia because I test drove it and loved it, but I only bought it if it was manufactured in the U.S. And son of a gun, my Kia, while it's a Korean vehicle, Kia is it's a Korean-owned company, it was manufactured 100% in the United States. So it didn't feel so bad buying a foreign-made car. But nationalism is going to result in Americans wanting to promote and to support American businesses. And economic nationalism is going to include the tariff of 1816. It's the first protective tariff in the United States' history, and it's going to happen in 1816. It's designed to shield American manufacturers from foreign competition, and as the author said, it was going to place a tariff on manufactured, imported goods, primarily from Britain, but not limited to Britain. But most of American commerce after the War of 1812 is going to resume with Britain. And it's going to raise taxes on imported goods. And the theory is going to be, if it raises taxes on imported goods, it's going to encourage people to buy from American manufacturers. And everybody wins if the tariff functions as properly. Everybody in America wins. American businesses win because they're able to sell more product. American consumers will win because they're going to be getting the same product for less money. It's going to help develop the economy. It's going to help commerce. It's a win-win if tariffs work. Now, again, the problem with tariffs oftentimes is there's going to be opposition to tariffs, especially among Southerners who cannot produce the goods that they need. They're relying on either British imports or from factories in the North, and the South is going to start to become economically dependent on Northern manufacturers. The South is going to start to become economically dependent, and that's going to lead to this further rift between North and South. North and South, North has the ability to manufacture goods because they have more factories. South doesn't have the ability to manufacture goods because their plantation economy is an agricultural economy. So the South is starting to feel, as we move into the 1820s and 30s, the Southern states are starting to feel oftentimes that Northern businesses are getting rich at their expense. Northern businesses are getting rich on their backs. What's the North how is the North making money on Southern farming, on Southern agriculture? What's happening in the North, and we haven't really talked about this yet, but from 7th grade or from your prior knowledge, what might be happening? What's the South shipping North that the North are manufacturing? What? Not tractors and machinery. The South is shipping a raw product north, cotton, and that cotton is going to start to be developed in what are called textile mills, which are basically places that manufacture cotton into cloth and fabric and clothes. And for the South, they are shipping their cotton north, they're selling their cotton north to be manufactured, and the cotton is being manufactured, and the North is making boatloads of money, starting in factories, in clothing, in cloth, in sheets, in drapes, in everything you imagine that you used to make, you make cotton with. And the South is going to languish behind because they're going to have to buy those products from the northern states. And the northern states, oftentimes, are, because of the tariff, the northern states are going to take advantage sometimes of the southern during periods of time where the prices on a lot of those goods are going to be higher than they normally would if there wasn't a tariff in place. So the tariff is kind of like a double-edged sword. It's designed to help American businesses and to help consumers, but there's going to be periods where the tariff doesn't really work as designed. And it's going to create resentment between North and South. Now, I embedded another video on the American system and the tariff. It's an NBC News clip. It's really informational. It's kind of cool. It's like 2 minutes long. I'm not going to play it now, but it's available during your own time. You can watch the 2-minute clip on the tariff and the American system. All right. Let's continue on and look at the next slide.
At the beginning of the 1800s,
let's take a peek at the second bank of the United States. This is Henry Clay's second leg of his three-legged stool. All right. Second Bank of the U.S. will be chartered or approved. That term means approved in 1816 as part of the American system. It provided a stronger national currency. There's going to be consistent money, and this is a huge point here, girls and guys. There's going to be a consistent money supply between and among the American states. You're going to have a national currency. Currency in Massachusetts will be the same as currency in Virginia. Currency in New York will be the same as in South and North Carolina. It's going to provide a national currency. It's going to help regulate the economy, and it's going to basically provide stability in the financial markets. So this is the second leg. This is the second leg of Clay's American system. The first leg would have been the tariff of 1816 that we just looked at in the previous slide. The second leg is going to be Clay's support of the National Bank. Now, this is kind of a hot topic because what group of people before the War of 1812 are going to oppose Alexander Hamilton's National Bank proposal? What? Yeah, Lizzie, why are the Anti-Federalists not going to be too gung-ho about supporting a national bank? Yeah, they feel it's only going to help a few select group of people. And on top of that, the Anti-Federalists look at the idea of a national bank and said that nowhere in the Watt does it authorize the creation of a national bank. Nowhere in the Constitution does it author. So now we're seeing people kind of do an about face. People who oppose the National Bank under Hamilton are now supporting it in 1816 under Clay's American system because they realize that hey look, whether you like the National Bank or not, of Hamilton's National Bank idea helped the country pay off its debt. The national bank that Hamilton supported and that Washington supported helped the country pare down its debt, and it helped the economy in the area after Washington was elected. So a lot of these people have kind of done an about face. We call people who change ideas politically, we call them flip-floppers. If you're a politician and you say, like, for example, a year ago, you oppose abortion rights, and then a year later, all of a sudden, you support abortion rights, that politician is often criticized as being a flip-flopper, somebody who kind of bounces back and forth. Well, in this instance, you do have some people who have changed their mindset on the national bank, recognizing that the national bank does serve an important purpose. But Lizzie's right and Palin's right. There was nowhere in the Constitution did it specifically say that a national bank, the federal government had the power to create a national bank, and we're going to learn today where that power is going to come from. It's going to come from a specific clause or a specific section in the Constitution. Ava, at the beginning of the school year, did I give all you guys a copy of a pocket Constitution? Yeah. Okay, all right. Have those with you. If you don't have them today, fine, but just kind of keep them in your binders or keep them in your books on the next couple of classes. We're going to be looking at it. All right. Let's go to the next slide, please. To kind of recap, economic plan proposed by Clay is the American system aimed at strengthening the nation's economy. It included protective tariffs, internal improvements in the national bank, and this system absolutely reflected a nationalist approach to the economy. Clay, with the American system, is trying to connect the three what?
G's.
The three G's.
Regions.
Regions, yes. He's basically trying to connect the three sections of the country. Okay? Clay is where did I say Clay was from? What part of the country was Clay from?
Kentucky.
He was a Kentuckian, which was considered north, south, or west. He was a Westerner. Clay wanted to do all he could with this American system to draw the three sections of the country together. The United States in 1816, the United States was a shell of the size of the country today. It was tiny, but for 1816, this whole area here, okay, was still a huge swath of land. It was a huge territory, and Clay wanted to do what he could to tie the three sections of the country together, recognizing that each section had its different economies, recognizing that each section is going to have its different types of populations, recognizing that the culture and the way of life in each section is different. Clay is trying to unite the country by improving the economy, by creating a national bank, and by helping American businesses. And that's kind of what he's hoping to accomplish here. All right? That's kind of what he's hoping to accomplish. Now, one more video clip on the American system before we go on.
During the first half of the 19th century, the debate between those promoting states' rights or regional interests and those promoting nationalism and the growth of the United States as an international power centered on an array of issues focused on the economy. Henry Clay from Kentucky, who became one of the most powerful congressmen in history, both in the House of Representatives as Speaker of the House and also as a senator, he promoted what was called the American system. And the American system, in his view, was designed to create a powerful international economy comparable to that of Great Britain. And to do so, the American system focused on three issues. It promoted a national bank so as to create a national currency and a national economy. It also promoted a tariff designed to tax imported goods from Europe and allow the young American industrial sector to succeed against foreign competition. And then the third aspect of the American system, the third leg of the stool, was the promotion of the United States government, the federal government, contributing to the expense of what were called internal improvements, new roads, new canals, new harbors, all designed to improve the circulation of the national economy. So Henry Clay, a Kentuckian, a slaveholder, was the foremost proponent of the American system whereby nationalism was integrated into economic policy.
I want you to look into your crystal balls here. We're talking 1816, 1817 here. What other infrastructure improvement that will come later will kind of be an extension or a continuation of Clay's plan to unite the country among sections? Railroads. Railroads, absolutely. Railroads, canal systems are going to be part of that endeavor. The railroad especially connecting east to west, which will be a monumental achievement in the mid part of the 19th century. That's all part of this American system expanded beyond Clay's reach here in the early part of the 19th century. Good job on that. All right, let's go to our next slide and take a look at presidential support for economic growth. So Madison, Monroe, and Adams promoted federal involvement in the economy. President Madison, okay, President Monroe, and President John Adams are going to support federal involvement. They supported infrastructure projects like roads and canals. The first major canal in the United States, in terms of, there were canals before this one, but the first major one in the United States is going to be the Erie Canal that will span 363 miles across New York. And that is a product of this belief. They all believed that a strong economy would unify the nation, would tie the nation together. It would, a unified economy, a booming economy in the north, a booming economy in the south, and a booming economy in the west, would diminish a lot of the sectional differences. There's an old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's the belief that you might have a little canoe in a harbor, okay, sitting in a harbor, a $500 canoe, or you could have a multi-million-dollar ocean liner, a cruise ship in the same harbor, and if it rains, okay, if it rains, what's going to happen to both boats? The boats are both going to float higher. And the idea here is that Clay in the American system, they're trying to lift all boats. They're trying to help each section of the country with this economic plan. Each section of the country with this economic plan in this American system. Again, a three-legged stool. Not to beat a dead horse, but we're gonna, if you remember a three-legged stool, that's Clay's American system. Tariffs, infrastructure improvements, and a national bank. All right? Three-legged stool. All right, next slide. Now we're shifting to the courts. We talked at the beginning how that the area, the time after the War of 1812, in 1816, we're going to see changes in how the court decides things. And that's going to be evident on the court of John Marshall. Now, last year, real quick here, permission to tell a short story. Last year, for the first year in this class, I assigned a SCOTUS project, Supreme Court Justice project. Did you guys hear about that? I had 17 students last year all pick an individual Supreme Court justice, and everybody wrote a research paper on a specific justice. I thought the kids did a great job on it. It was the first time that they had done a real research paper, and I think they enjoyed it for the most part. We're not going to do that assignment this year. We're going to spend more time on Regents Prep. But one of my students, Aidan Fleming, did a wonderful paper on John Marshall. And John Marshall is going to be the first significant Supreme Court justice, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who will span 30 years on the court. And his influence as a Supreme Court justice, as the Chief Justice, is going to be basically established during this period of time that we're talking about. We're going to talk about the Marshall Court and strengthening federal power. The Marshall Court and strengthening federal power. From last week, Haley, we talked about Marshall's decision in Marbury versus Madison. what did that decision basically do for the power of the Supreme Court? Forget the decision itself for Marbury and Madison, but in terms of the stature of the court, what did Marbury versus Madison do for the Supreme Court? It elevated the stature of the court and basically made them a co-equal branch of the government. Okay? Supreme Court basically said with that decision, hey, we're part of this three branches of government too, and our part is just as important as yours, and it establishes itself as that. Now, Chief Justice John Marshall is going to lead the Supreme Court during this period after the War of 1812. He is known for what is going to be called a nationalist interpretation of the Constitution. And he's going to issue rulings that limited state powers and strengthened federal authority. Marshall, and if there's one thing you need to know about Marshall and his court, his rulings and his court's rulings, when we talk about his rulings, we're talking about the court that he presided over, the court that he led. His rulings are going to, in many cases, limit the power of the states and elevate or strengthen the power of the national government. All right? Marshall, John Marshall, Supreme Court Justice and the Chief Justice. And when we talk about the Marshall Court, we're talking about the court under his tutelage, the court under his watch, and it was about a 30-year span. It's 30 years because, as we talked about earlier in the year, there are no limitations on the term of service for a Supreme Court Justice. A Supreme Court Justice is appointed, and if confirmed by the Senate, they are appointed for life. I think we had this conversation. Because of that, and because of some recent court decisions that our own Supreme Court has made in the last 5 years, many people are inclined nowadays to support limitations on the appointments for a Supreme Court Justice because of the fact that a lot of people don't like some of the most recent decisions. So there's been this, people entertaining the ideas of placing limits on Supreme Court justices, perhaps 12 years, perhaps 18 years. That would require a major piece of legislation in the Congress that I don't feel there's support for now, but it's something that people are talking about. A lot of people view the fact that Supreme Court justices have lifetime appointments. They view that as inconsistent with the other branches of government. Certainly the president could not serve a lifetime in the executive branch. The president is limited to 2 terms, 8 years. There are no limitations on Congress. Congress can serve as many times as they're elected, and oftentimes, in my view, they serve far too long to be useful. But there are no limitations on members of Congress. There's no limitations on the Supreme Court Justice, but there are limitations on the president, all right, as we know from our Constitution. All right, let's continue on and look at slide 8 and talk about one of those cases that you're going to have to work on this week. And this will be a case decided in 1819 by the Marshall Court, and it's going to involve Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, a couple hours away, not too far from here. Dartmouth College, a member of what group of elite colleges? The Ivy League. The Ivy League. What New York college is a member of the Ivy League? There's actually a couple. Cornell and Columbia. Cornell and Columbia. And there's little Ivies. Schools that are not quite Ivy League stature, but they're considered close. We've got another one in New York, out west in Hamilton, called Colgate University. Not the toothpaste company, different family, but the Colgate University in central New York, Hamilton. All right. What is the oldest established Ivy League university? Harvard, which established in 1600s. It was opened initially as a school to train ministers. But in any event, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, 1819. It was a case involving Dartmouth and the charter. It ruled that states cannot interfere with private contracts. It strengthened property rights and it limited state powers. Again, consistent with the Marshall Court's citing with the power of the national government over state governments. And I'd like you, when you get a moment, there'll be a video clip linked to Dartmouth v. Woodard tonight, short clip on Dartmouth v. Woodard, and there will be a short clip on McCulloch versus Maryland, which is the same year, 1819, and this will involve the Second Bank of the United States, a case involving the Second Bank of the U.S. It established federal supremacy over state laws. I want you to hear an alarm bell go off when you hear this. The case of McCulloch versus Maryland is going to establish federal supremacy over state laws, meaning if a state law is in effect, that says it's totally okay for Dylan to pick his nose on the sidewalk any day of the week he wants, and that's a state law in New York, and a federal law was passed outlawing nose picking on state highways, guess what? The federal law outlawing nose picking on federal highways takes precedence over the state law that allows it. So this is not a small case. It's an important case. I don't want you getting bogged down in too many details when you're doing the video and you're answering your worksheet question on this, but just understand that both of these cases, big picture here, both of these cases are going to establish the preeminence of the national government over state governments. And that's consistent with this Marshall idea that the national power, national government, is going to have more sway over state governments. Okay? Which political party of the first two would align themselves with Marshall's thinking on this? Would Marshall's supporters be Federalists, or would Marshall's supporters, do you think, be anti-Federalists? Yeah, Marshall supporters would largely be fair. If you believe in a stronger central government, a stronger federal government, you're going to go along with Marshall's view on the Constitution, that the Constitution has to have a strong national government. Okay? All right, necessary and proper. Here is where I need you to bring in your Constitution books tomorrow. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this. McCulloch versus Maryland expanded interpretation of this clause called the necessary and proper clause. The Constitution, I'm going to give you a quick little lesson on the Constitution. The Constitution basically says what your rights are, what your freedoms are, what government can do, and what government cannot do. It says what your rights are, what your freedoms are, and what government cannot do. The necessary and proper clause of the Constitution is going to be a section in Article 1 of the Constitution that is going to provide latitude for the government to take action that might not otherwise be specifically stated in the Constitution. It's called the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution. This is going to give Congress the right to take actions not explicitly forbidden by the Constitution. In other words, if the Constitution doesn't say the government can't do it in black and white, the Constitution says that the government can't do something and it's not there in black and white, the necessary and proper clause could and will provide wiggle room for the Congress to pass laws even if the Constitution doesn't specifically speak to them. And one of those areas is going to be on the national bank. Actions must be within the scope of the Constitution in order for this to apply, but we're going to take a look at this clause. This is called, and whoever named this I think is pretty incredible, and we'll close on this topic today. This necessary and proper clause is called the elastic clause. When you think elastic on it, you think of what? A rubber band. And that's exactly what I want you to think about, because the rubber band does what? It stretches. Okay, the elastic clause, the necessary and proper clause, is going to allow the Congress to stretch its abilities to accomplish something, to pass a law, to do something that's not specifically mentioned as under its authority in the Constitution. It's going to give the Congress the right or the ability to stretch its powers. With that in mind, let's just watch a quick video on this topic, and then we'll go.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to HVCC History. I was just talking to a kid, and I asked the kid what the elastic clause was, and he said it means Congress can do anything it wants that's necessary and proper. And I said, Doe, you are wrong. Everybody out there, we need to understand the elastic clause if you're going to understand federalism in the least. So let's start really quick with the definition, and if you know who I am, you know I do this all the time. Federalism is the division of power between the federal government and the states. And how we define that is with the U.S. Constitution. So basically, the state power rests in the 10th Amendment, right? And the 10th Amendment, reserved power, states that anything that's not in the Constitution, that's not given to the federal government to do, is reserved for the states. Which means that the federal government gets its power from the Constitution. So when we look at the Constitution and we look for governmental power, federal power, it's really all over, but its biggest concentration is in Article 1, Section 8. This is called delegated power. Article 1 is legislative, and Article...
I'm going to ask you guys to do the following. Hold off on watching this video. We'll watch this in class tomorrow, but watch the 2 videos on the other Supreme Court cases tonight for tomorrow's class. Okay? Muchas gracias. You too, guys. Good night, girls. How are you? What's going on, man? You going to 8th grade? No. No? You having a good time? How's your leg?
Pretty good.
Healed up good?
Yeah, walking on.
Good. 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 Still riding?
Yeah.
Good. You back on it?
Yeah.
And you're back on the horse, right? Yeah. See you, man. Hello. I got 2 Brownells. I'm doing detention. I got 2 Brownells, and I've got there's one other one too. Leanne sent me Trey Howard. Yeah. All right. Okay. Bye.
Hey, Mr. Friday.
Hey, what's up, Court?
I
See you, buddy.
don't know.
Wade, how you doing, brother? Good.
I did,
Good night, Trey. Or good night, Wade. Trey, right there on your one. Yeah, I want you guys to take note on the board here, all right? Make sure you take note on the board. If you're here for detention, that's for you guys. All right. I got ones on top you can take too.
Question, what's the additional consequence tomorrow?
That means you're in more trouble. All right. So spread out, one at a table. I don't want anybody next to each other sharing the same table. Just spread out and get to work. You're not going to sit here and do nothing. You're not going to sit here and sleep. You're going to stay active. You're going to stay busy. Yep. Yep. Mr. Brownell, is there another Brownell that's supposed to be here? Is that your brother?
Sebastian Brownell?
I take that back. Shane and Caleb Brennan school. There's no Caleb Brownell, is there? That's a typo on Mrs. Fleming's part.